What's checking, everybody? Welcome to the Overreaction Monday show. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson, and back from the Combine, Mr. Alex Dunlap. Guys, this show brought to you by the guys over at rogueshop.com. Make sure you leave your Google reviews. It helps them out a lot. We're actually going to be doing a promotion this week. You'll have an opportunity to win a $100 gift card, as well as some other prizes that we're going to be giving out. But check out all the products over at rogueshop.com. The topicals, the oils, the Delta 8 products. They've got stuff for the pets. They've got stuff for your parents. They've got stuff for you, whether you want cartridges or stuff to make the pain go away. There's a little bit of everything right there. The guys over at Rogue Shop will always take care of you. They take care of us. And we just can't give them a bigger endorsement if we tried. Welcome to everybody. I see Richard in the chat right now. What up, Richard? Thanks to everybody already jumping into the Specs chat. We love
at noon, Richard. I'm doing lunch with Richard today.
Oh, well, I've got commentary I'll save for a different day. But yeah, I last time I was with Richard, we had a hell of a good time. I actually told him that a week ago when we talked. Guys, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, get notifications, do all of those things. The big topic that we're talking about today, do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? I think one of the reasons why we're asking that question is because what a weekend, what a week that the Longhorns had in Indianapolis at the Combine, obviously highlighted by Xavier Worthy's record-setting 4-1 in the 40. It's still, I think, on the tips of everybody's tongues going into a Monday. Alex, you were there. I asked you beforehand, did you leave? Did you and Cody leave before Xavier ran? And you said no, that you were in the building. So before we jump into can this team go 12-0, do they have enough, especially considering what they've lost, set the scene for us for Xavier Worthy's record-setting 40 time, because I don't think enough people realize there were people in the stands. There was a bit of a crowd. So it wasn't just your normal testing atmosphere. And I think you can feel that on television when watching.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it's like it's always been such a sterile environment, at the Combine, so stuffy and very, very quiet. You could hear a church mouse in there, And Anwar, you probably remember from the old PFWA suite that they have there, that they would allow us to go in on Saturdays to do the, or I guess it used to be on Sundays, right? Because they switched it to where Monday used to be the last day, but now they have it different. But it was, there was no one in there except scouts and team personnel. They allowed 20 members of the media in there into the PFWA suite that the NFL has, right? And you had to do this thing called make a pool report, to where you couldn't report from it yourself. You couldn't do anything. You had to make a report that was just for everybody, right? You had to contribute to a report that all the reporters in the whole Combine could use, right? About the throwing sessions. Now it's a completely different animal, dude. The NFL, we know that they love to make money, right? And they found a way to, soon they're going to start charging tickets for this, because that was fun, dude. That was fun as hell yesterday or on Saturday. It was fun to me to watch all the position groups, but man, the whole back bowl of Lucas Oil was just filled up with people still between the, it's only the end zone where the people are, right? Where the fans are. And it's all media and team personnel. It's just from the 10-yard line on through the other bowl.
Can anybody go, Alex? Any fan go? Just show up?
Any fans?
Yeah. You said the fans are there. Is that like season ticket holders or just fans?
Anyone. Yeah, you go, you show up until they run out of space. And I'd be surprised if they didn't come close to running out of space, man. That thing was packed for the wide receivers and the running backs on Saturday. And I remember when Xavier went, we were doing our timing and stuff like that, and with our own stopwatches. And Cody was doing Xavier, and he looked over at me and he's like, "This isn't right," And he had him even fat, like he had him at like a 4.16 or something. He's like, I was off, and clearly he was off by a little bit, but it was foreshadowing into that first 4.25. And then around us, everybody first of all, the whole crowd goes absolutely nuts whenever they see the 4.25 pop up. It was a little bit of a delayed reaction at first because when you're inside the stadium, Catch, Mike Band, our guy from our fantasy football league. He's actually the one that works for the NFL research, and he's the one that puts the numbers up that come up first as the unofficial times, right? They don't give them inside the stadium because they want to give runners the opportunity, or they don't want to give them the opportunity as easily to say that they're going to stand on their first time. The NFL wants them to run twice, right? So they don't put the numbers up inside the stadium. So we're having to watch the stuff on our phones to see what these unofficial times coming in are, right? Now, whenever the second run goes, their first unofficial run pops up, and then they can sort of see it. But what Ban was telling me is he was like, man, most of these guys, especially if they have a big run, they have their phones with them all the time nowadays, and their agents will text them and tell them their number and tell them whether or not to run again. And so whenever we had sort of saw on the broadcast that Xavier Worthy ran a 4.25, then they popped it up on the screen, right, where they did it like a comparison between him and Deshaun Jackson or something like that, and showed both their 40s, and people saw that 4.25, and everyone goes nuts, right? And so people are like, he's not going to run again. He's not going to run again. But then you start to hear the crowd start swelling up and bubbling up again because over on the side, Xavier Worthy is starting to warm up again. And they're like, oh, dude, he's going to break it looks like he's going to try and break the record, And he runs and he does it. And you guys probably heard it on TV, man. Before the number even popped up for that original 4.42, before it got adjusted down to the 4.21, whenever before the number even popped up, the crowd went nuts. Everybody in the stadium knew that was a better run than the first run, and he just improved on it. And he even knew, because you saw he ran through the 40 and he put his arms up and stuff before his number even popped up. He was back there celebrating, and I think that's just a track guy that just knows. I think deep down, Xavier Worthy told me at the combine this week that the thing he was tilted most about the whole, with the especially coming from California with kind of the government response to COVID. Like they weren't allowed to do sports at all for a little bit longer than some other states. And the thing that he was most, tilted about with that is he's like, dude, I'm going to have this 10-5 100s stuck on me like this stink for the rest of my life. He's like, I should have been a 10-2 or like they should be talking about me like a 10-2 or 10-100. Your meter dash kind of guy. And he's like, having this 10-5 on me is just something, he carries around like a cloud. So obviously he kind of knows his body. He knows his track stuff. He knew he was going to go break that thing, dude. And when he broke it, everybody there before the number even popped up knew that he broke that thing. And I remember thinking to myself, after he went through the 40 and he was just kind of, he was still excited and kind of still sprinting a little bit kind of towards the back of the dome and engaging with the crowd. I said, you put a football in his hands, and that right there looks like Tyreek Hill, he gets the ball on some right there at the back near the end zone. And next thing you know, in a flash, he's flipped the field and all of a sudden he's on the other side of the field and celebrating with the fans and stuff like that. I think that was the sort of indelible image that he probably left with a lot of evaluators that, I know it doesn't sound like that big a deal, Catch, like thinking the difference between a 4.34, 4.21, that's all otherworldly speed. Right. But I think you reach a critical spot where you're just like, oh gosh, when they get that fast, you see it with your own eyes and you're just like, man, it was my 13th combine, by far the most memorable moment that I've had there. I know that, we covered Texas and we've seen Xavier Worthy's story, but I think it would have been even, I was there for John Ross's. It didn't feel anything like Xavier Worthy. So yeah, man, it's a big day for him. And what the crazy thing was? A lot of these guys tested awesome. I mean, a lot of these dudes tested so much better. I mean, Ryan Watts tested with the corners. Ryan Watts ran with the corners. He didn't even run with the safeties. And he tests like a maniac, Adonai Mitchell runs a 4.35. Like, I'm sure we're going to talk about all these dudes, but Adonai Mitchell at the media availabilities was like, dude, I never run routes full speed. It's like, that's how I stay on top of guys. Like, I don't like to let them know how fast I am. And so he showed, like, 4.35. It's just, wow, man, what a big weekend for these guys. It was Texas was the headliner.
Catch. He said Tyreek Hill, right? And it just made me think of Patrick Mahomes tweeting about Xavier's time throughout the weekend. You don't think Patrick Mahomes has been like, I need a guy like that again in my life?
Don't let that dude go to the Chiefs, NFL. There are 31 teams, 31 picks to make sure that Xavier Worthy doesn't go to the Chiefs. And I don't think he will. There are going to be some people that – the thing is, he's not a track guy playing football. Xavier Worthy is a football player that's just ridiculously fast. And Anwar, the thing I was going to say is, one, I love the fact that Xavier's competitiveness, his agent might have told him, hey, 4.25, we're good. And I don't think Xavier would have cared. He wanted the record. He won't ever be remembered for his 10.5 speed anymore. He'll always have the combine score and now in that moment. And it's actually a different kind of pressure that if he doesn't make it as an NFL player, that will hover around him that, oh, he was just a fast guy. So in its own way, it adds pressure, I think, to Xavier Worthy moving forward. The other thing was, Alex, I don't know if you saw it, but when they were doing the broadcast, and Anwar, I'm sure you saw it, they were in the middle of another discussion. And in the middle of Xavier Worthy's run, the announcers, before he was ever done, they're like, oh my God, this looks different. And 4.25 does look different. And of all the 40s, it did look, Alex, the point you make is correct. You think it would all look the same, that the difference between a 10th here or 0.13 here or there, that it wouldn't necessarily be noticeable to the naked eye. And yet it was noticeable. Everybody that watched that could see, like, holy crap, this guy's different. And Anwar, I think the point that Alex also makes about the combine kind of being owned by Texas throughout the week, even on Sunday, Christian Jones had a hell of a performance. So it's when we segue into this conversation of, do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? The backdrop of this conversation will be, holy cow, that was one insanely talented team that Texas put on the field in 2023.
Yeah. First of all, if I'm Xavier Worthy, I don't want any kind of John Ross comparison, because John Ross didn't really do anything in the NFL. So that's all we really know John Ross for, is that he was really good at the combine. He put up a really good speed. But, to your point about Xavier being kind of well-rounded, if you're Xavier, you're like, that's cool, but don't compare me to that guy. That guy was just a guy that's all we ever know. Because, your favorite John Ross NFL memory is what? Nothing. Yeah. So
the combine.
Right, Alex?
Not sure I have one. Yeah.
That's it, right? So you want to achieve more than that. And to your overall point, though, when you start seeing, the performances from 11 outside of Jordan Whittington, right? Which is, I think he's about the only guy that didn't do much, Alex. It was
Brooks and Ford didn't work out.
Yeah, and Ford was
in keeping with their decision not to play, and in keeping with their decision not to participate in the Senior Bowl. So, but you ask these guys about it, they won't get into. I kind of tried to ask Jay Witt about it. I mean, he's such a nice guy. I don't want to push him, But he said, like, he had a hamstring thing come up this week. I'm like, well, the Senior Bowl wasn't this week, So I don't know exactly what's going on with him, but he says he'll be good for Pro Day. I haven't looked and seen what he did. He told me he was going to do bench, but I haven't gone and looked and see whether he actually followed through with that. But he said that he was going to be holding off till the Pro Day to do everything else. I'll tell you one thing about Xavier Worthy. You said he's competitive enough, whatever. Well, his agent did call him after that second 40 and say, no more. I don't care how competitive you are. No routes, no change of direction stuff. We're not going to bust an ankle here. I'd be surprised if Xavier Worthy lifts a finger through the whole rest of the process. Like, I don't think
he's going to show up at Pro Day and he's going to look really nice in his outfit, but that's about it.
Bernard's jumpsuit and, cheer on his teammates. Right.
By the way, Jalen Ford had a groin injury and that's why he didn't participate.
Okay.
So, Anwar, your big takeaway from this weekend was what?
Well, my biggest takeaway is that Steve Sarkisian has stacked a lot of talent, and not only stacked, but more so they developed a lot of talent here. But I'm talking stack and development. There's probably two different things, but they're both for cohesive units. To be able to look at those guys, when you talk about what Byron Murphy was able to do, and even Tavondre Sweat to a certain degree, even as a big guy, being able to do that, Xavier Worthy, bringing in an Adonai Mitchell, who ends up being a game changer, obviously, for them. Jatavian Sanders, his development. You just go down the list of guys, bringing in a Ryan Watts, where they stacked and developed a ton of talent. Like, I think this is the thing that I have, you and I have done countless shows, right? And I've always had this pushback with you as far as like, how many 5 stars did it take to beat, TCU, right? But my pushback has always been when it comes to like, the combine and things like that. And I've always been like, look, man, it is what it is. Like, just find a way to beat Oklahoma State. But now when you see a talented team like Texas throw 11 guys in there, and then you look at the season that they had, like the math is mathing, right? This is what the Georgias of the world would do. This is what the Alabamas of the world would do. Michigan had a boatload of guys who were there as well, right? And so that to me is the indicator of an elite program. I think that's the thing that you've talked about for so many years, Catch, as far as this is what the elite of the elite do. They send double-digit guys to the combine, and then those guys ball out, and then you walk away saying, okay, how many first-rounders is Georgia going to have? How many second-rounders is, Alabama going to have? And that's the conversation. So that, to me, ends up being the thing where I look at, Texas arriving, I look at it and say to myself, well, damn, just for that overall take, it is not only am I excited about what they were done, but I'm also excited about what the future looks like as far as who the next group of guys are going to be.
Yeah, when you recruit at an elite level, it means that when this spectacular class of draft prospects departs, the next one just comes aboard, right? I mean, it's funny. I think a conversation that we've been having with Cody Carpentier a lot in the last couple of weeks is, do you think next year's group has even more guys at the combine? Are there even more day 1 and day 2 guys combined when you look at next year's roster? And I think that is a segue potentially into the conversation that we're ultimately going to have here in the show about whether or not this team has enough to finish 12-0. I can't help but think back to last year when Bijan and Roshan left, and it was like, the running game can't be better than it was a year ago.
It can't be anywhere near as good.
It can't. And then Jonathan Brooks shows up, and you're like,
it's fine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up is because I think it's abundantly clear to me that Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell as a combo are the most dynamic and athletic and spectacularly explosive group of receivers that the Longhorns have ever had in the program's history. I've seen all of the candidates that would be in the conversation, and those
what are they like? What are they? What are they?
Well,
like that's just a big thing. I'm trying to think back to the kind of V1.
You probably go Roy Williams and BJ Johnson.
Yeah, that's.
And look, Roy goes as a top 5 pick in the NFL and was a testing monster. Mm-hmm. So, but even his combine wasn't as good. It was really good, but I don't know that it was quite as good as Adonai Mitchell, which was really fascinating to me because Roy Williams was a state champion long jumper and like a phenomenal athlete.
And then Adonai goes 99th percentile in the broad jump.
Yes.
91st percentile in the vertical, 95th percentile in the 40. That's a lot of 90-something percentiles, dude.
Alex, I was sitting there thinking for about an hour on Saturday that Adonai Mitchell had just had the best combine performance in the history of the Texas program.
Me too.
And then Xavier Worthy did what he did, and it almost wrongfully overshadows Adonai because, look, because both of them put up freakish numbers, but the only thing that anybody's going to remember is 4.21. They're not even going to pay attention to the fact that Xavier had a 40-plus inch vertical, that his broad jump was, I think, 10 feet, 11 inches, so nothing to sneeze at either. But the one thing I won't say that I said last year was like, well, they got to take a step back at wide receiver because how can you do better than the two guys that just left. But I said that about the running back position a year ago, and then Jonathan Brooks and really the entire group of Texas running backs kind of proved to us like, oh, it was just fine. Like maybe they didn't quite have the spectacular highs that Bijan brought, but from a production standpoint, they were just fine. And I look at next year's wide receivers and I see Jonte Cook, who, oh, by the way, those dudes just couldn't stop talking about at the combine. You think about Isaiah Bond, who arrives at Texas from Alabama, like Adonai Mitchell, with a reputation that had people projecting him as a high pick in next year's draft.
And, just like I don't mean to interrupt, Catch, but I did ask. That was the thing. It's like I tee it up for those Jonte Cook things those were completely unsolicited, right? I'm just like, who's next, right? Who's next to Texas? You guys and they all just say Jonte. And I'll tell you this too. You ask all the Alabama guys about Isaiah Bond, and they say, well, there's a guy that didn't drop a single ball in any game last year or in any single practice, and he like a total G. Like these Alabama dudes are saying this. So it's like you get a lot of unsolicited love for it's like the unsolicited love for Jonte is probably the strongest. But when you ask those Alabama guys specifically about Isaiah Bond, they talk about him like he's like a very special player.
So Anwar, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Does Texas have enough to finish 12-0? I think the backdrop really is the overall pool of talent that has departed this week revealed itself, I think, to be even more special than we thought it was. We knew Murphy was good. We knew Sweat was incredible last year. Same with those receivers. But we're talking about a guy like Christian Jones, who's like 7th, 8th, something like that in the tier of guys in this draft. And he tested yesterday like, Alex, you love this because I don't think anybody at the combine had bigger hands than Christian Jones. His arm length was in the 80s. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly what it was. I wrote it down and was just like, good God. He runs a 5.05 40-yard dash. And in any other year, we would be talking about, my God, Christian Jones, what a combine performance he had. And now he's just kind of down the list of guys. It's a special group that departs. So in asking if Texas can go 12-0, something that it didn't do a year ago, although they came close, they have to do it without this special group of players. Do they have enough remaining special players to offset the group that they just lost? It's a fascinating conversation because I don't find myself really leaning one way or the other. It feels very possible. Will they do it? I don't know. And ultimately, that's the question in the title of the video today.
I mean, what's interesting, Catch, is that, to your point, like we've seen over the last couple of years, guys who have just come out of quote unquote nowhere and become studs, under Sarkisian, right? So nowhere, right, is T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, right? Those guys, for the most part, they come out of nowhere, and you're looking at those guys as day one, day two guys coming in, going into the draft. You brought up the point about Bijan and Roshan, and of course, Jonathan Brooks comes out of nowhere, and he ends up being that guy, and really, to a certain degree, Jaden Blue, who, Catch, we know that there was a time where Jaden Blue was like, there was some uncertainty about his future here at Texas. And now some people look at Blue and say, I think he should start ahead of instead of Baxter, right? But he comes out.
Reporter in this market reported that Blue is transferring.
People forget. No. It didn't happen, Catch.
No one remembers it when other people report stuff like that.
No one remembers everyone else's inaccurate reports. They just pick apart our accurate reports, right? Catch, you remember when there was a time when Jalen Ford comes out of nowhere?
Dear Mitchell broke a foot in practice this summer and everything else, right? Come on, dude. It's just
Jalen Ford. Yeah. Jalen Ford, comes out of nowhere at some point, right? And you're just like, where the hell did that come from, right? And I think there's a list of guys who we've gone into the season and we've said to ourselves, like, man, I don't know if Texas is going to be good at that position. We'll see. And next thing you know, we're at the end of the year and going, what the hell were we even worried about, man? They've got dudes. I mean, I think they are stacked to the point where as crazy as it may sound, I don't know how crazy it does sound, to be quite honest with you. I mean, obviously, the Georgia game is going to be, a super tough game. They got to go on the road against Michigan. The back half of the schedule is pretty darn easy. I mean, but the talent level that's here, even if you lose in some of these guys in the receiver room, like you mentioned in Jonte Cook, you still got a Ryan Wingo who's coming in, right? I mean, you still got studs. So, I mean, that's where I'm at with this thing. Like, do they have enough to finish at 12-0? I tell you what, if El Presidente starts talking about it in the offseason, I won't shout him down this year.
Yeah, I'm with Anwar. It's just it makes here's the one thing, right? Here's the one thing, and I saw some people in chat sort of talking about this, about how it feels like I did see on Twitter, X, whatever. Like I did see people posting this weekend after the wide receiver group. It's like, well, now Quinn Ewers has a lot more to prove. Now Quinn Ewers is going to have to show that, whatever 20, what was it, catch 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, something like that with these guys, right?
You could look that up. I'll be honest, I have not memorized.
Are you talking about Quinn's stats from last year?
And whatever. Like, I'm
pretty sure I have it somewhere in the system.
Yeah,
I don't think but it's like, doesn't make all conference, stuff like that with
22 and 6.
Yeah. With a guy who, there was talk around Indy, people were asking me about Kelvin Banks. You know what I mean? Like, there's talk about Kelvin Banks for next year. Like, is he really the offensive tackle one? There's the brewing discussion. Now, I'll just get way out in front of this. It's between him and the kid at LSU. That's the discussion that people are having. I'm not that familiar with the LSU guy, to be honest. Gosh, his name is. I'll look it up next time one of you guys are talking.
Hurd, Lance Hurd, is that the guy?
I'm not sure that's it. I'll tell you in just 1 second. I just need to look at the roster. But it's but that's been the narrative, right? He had this guy that could be OT1 last year. He's got these 2 wide receivers that were 2 of the 3 fastest times this year, and they test through the roof. There was JT Sanders, who, JT Sanders probably, of all these guys we talked about that had big weeks, I feel like JT Sanders might have had one of the ones that was more of a mediocre to kind of middling sort of combine. But JT Sanders still widely considered the tight end 2 in this class. I know that Theo Johnson was a dude who did himself a whole lot of favors this week and might be kind of worked up into that conversation after a really good Senior Bowl, really good combine. But you're still talking about a guy right at the very, very, very tippy top of the class. You got the guy that's considered by most to be the RB1 after the miserable day of, with as great a day of testing as the wide receivers had. The running backs were just, if you thought this class was bad before the combine, like, what do you think of it now? That was a miserable day of testing as far as the running backs were concerned. So Jay Brooks, I feel like just even by not having to do anything, kind of upped his stock a little bit just by way of these other dudes sort of failing. So you have a lot of pieces around you on offense. People say, like, why didn't Quinn do more? And to me, I think it's a fair enough question to ask. But I also think I think that serves as motivation for Quinn. It might be, it might be tough to kind of go back and get a chip on your shoulder coming into your final season to say, like, well, we made it to the CFP last year. I was the Big 12 championship game MVP, like all this stuff like that. This is something where he has an actual narrative that's out against it that people are going to be saying, it keeps his feet held to the fire a little bit about really needing to continue to prove himself. And I do think that the pieces around him, I know Ketch loves Silas Bolden. We talk about Isaiah Bond. We talk about Matthew Golden. We talk about Jonte Cook. How's a guy like Ryan Wingo even going to get on the field? It's like, that feels like a problem, right? It's a good problem. It's a rich people problem. But those are all really good players. Like, if they're not pedigree players that have produced somewhere else, they're some of Ketch's super blue chip types. And you get these guys in the pipe. You get them moving around. You start to see how they interact with the offense. Next thing you know, guess what happens? People, like Anwar said, they come out of nowhere. And for us, it's not coming out of nowhere because we're in the, we microanalyze this team. We're like, our audience here is the audience of the hyper-informed, right? Like, no one's going to come out of nowhere to the fans who watch this. But to the general public, yeah, they're going to see some people pop off out of nowhere because when you build the program like Sark and this current staff has, that's just what tends to happen.
That's the question for me is, hold on, because if the question is, why could Quinn have done more? I guess my question would have been, what more would they have wanted to have been done as opposed to last year? Are we just talking? Is it simplistic as beat Washington? Is that where we're at in the question of it?
He wasn't great last year. He was just very good. No, and this isn't like revisionist history. I mean, he wasn't better than Dylan Gabriel in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma on a day when for Texas to win that game, he needed to be better. In the games that Texas lost, he was clearly the second best quarterback. We look at the Michael Penix, we look at the Dylan Gabriel. When you look at his list of games, I know pass efficiency rating isn't.
I've got it. Let's do it.
But if you put it up there, from the back end of September, so he starts out against Rice 169, Alabama 166, Baylor 199. But after the Baylor game, once you go from September 23rd on, he only has one game the rest of the way where his quarterback rating was above a 163.2, and that was in the Big 12 championship game. But, anything 163.2 or below it's very good. It's good. One of the things I loved about Quinn a year ago was that his consistency, he wasn't a guy that was an 88, terrible one week, but then great the next. He was very consistently in the 150s and in the low 160s. Kansas 153, Oklahoma 160, Houston 163.2, TCU 151, Iowa State 161. Two of the last three games he played in were his worst games of the season against Tech and Washington. But I think the thing that you'd like to see from, especially considering that we now look certifiably, you look at Worthy and Mitchell and you say, Texas has never had a pair of receivers as dynamic and talented together as what Ewers had a year ago. He didn't put up spectacular numbers. He put up very good numbers. And yeah, Alex, it is Will Campbell, the offensive.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I saw that. I looked it up and I was like, okay, Will Campbell, duh. But I think the next step, and look, the thing is, I don't doubt that Ewers can get there. He took a step up last year from the year before. Now it's time for him to take one more big step up. And if he does, that's the kind of step that puts him into the nationally elite category, which he wasn't a year ago. He didn't have any Heisman votes. Weirdly, it was Jalen Milroe that finished sixth in the Heisman. And Quinn Ewers wasn't even first team All Big 12. And in some publications, finished as an honorable mention All Big 12 player. And maybe some of that had to do with the injury. That's another piece of this. When we talk about, do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? We've talked about the need for Ewers to stay healthy. While I don't have a whole lot of doubt about Arch Manning and his long-term future, depending where on the schedule, if it happens that Ewers were to get banged up and need to miss a couple of games, it's some fine margins that decide 12-0 versus 11-1 or 10-2. I think
what's interesting about that though, Catch, from a stat standpoint, Quinn wasn't that far off of some of the other guys that you've mentioned.
But none of the guys that are coming back were nationally elite a year ago. The guys that departed, though, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, although Penix's numbers are weird, and I don't think Penix was great in Indianapolis from what I could tell. Caleb Williams.
I'm still waiting to see the Michael Penix that we saw versus Texas, which
You're
is a whole different conversation.
It was a one-off.
That's a whole different convo, but it's like what? Yeah, Senior Bowl and Combine is kind of.
I mean, on where we've had the conversation about where Ewers ranks in the top 5 of returning quarterbacks. You can almost put that list of 5 or 6 that we're talking about in any order, but none of them. The thing that we all agreed on was that none of them were elite yet. And I think that's the step that he has to take. And if you're asking me, do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? For me, it comes down to Quinn Ewers. Do we finally see a guy that justifiably proves that he deserved to be the number 1 overall player in his recruiting class? That's not what we've seen so far. I mean, if he's had been that guy thus far, he's in this draft. He came back for another year in part because had he come into this draft, there was no guarantee that he'd be a first or second round pick, that, he was down the list of quarterback options in this particular draft. and that maybe next year that it doesn't quite exist in that fashion. But like for me, the question is the answer to do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? They do if Quinn Ewers stays healthy and he takes a step forward. To me, it's that simple. I think the rest of the team around him is more than good enough to run the table. And I think next year's participants in the draft, which I expect to be double digits at the combine again in 2025, I think will ultimately prove that. I think we'll be sitting here in 12 months from now, and maybe they won't quite own the combine the way this past year's group did, but it's going to be a lot of guys and a lot of discussion about first and second day and third day. The Longhorns will have guys up and down the draft. It's about whether or not Ewers can lead them there. I think he can. It's just not a guarantee, though.
Alex, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm just trying. I was just sorry. I was just mentioned double-digit guys. I was kind of just going over the list in my head, trying to think of who they would be. What was the exact question? I'm sorry. I was thinking I was just trying to think over my. Can we talk about that? Who those guys would be?
He was talking about Quinn.
Okay, Quinn. Okay.
All right. Well, so look, we'll count them off real quick. So
Okay.
Quinn, let me make sure my fingers are on the Quinn, Isaiah Bond.
Banks.
Well, let's just go position by position.
Okay.
So quarterback, Ewers. Running back, I'll leave those guys out for now because I don't know about. Yeah, it's impossible to call. But we just said the same thing about Jonathan Brooks a year ago. We wouldn't have included him in the number of guys. But I think at the wide receiver position, you're talking about Isaiah Bond. You're talking about.
And always remember, Jordan Whittington got to go. So think about that. You know, it's like you think about, well, could Silas Bolden go? It's like, well, I mean, Witt got to go.
Well, Bolden this will be Bolden's last year. So I think there's a good chance. He's a small guy. I wonder if he'll get small guy shaft. Okay, there's 3. Gunnar Helm is 4. Kelvin Banks is 5. There could be a DJ Campbell surprise. Yeah. If he plays like he did this year, he'll go. And there almost would be nothing in it for him to return as, you know what I mean, as an interior guy. His stock may be as high as it'll get when it is that he makes a decision. You think about the defensive line. I think Barron Sorrell makes 7. Alfred Collins makes 8.
Isn't Burke eligible?
He will be, and there's already some discussion about him. But let's hold him out for now.
Okay.
We're at 8. We get to linebacker.
How much more time does Trey Moore have again?
He's draft eligible after this season, so he could be 9.
Maybe give him like a half, 8.5 or something.
Akuba's 10.
Yep.
You look at the corners. I mean, you know, they're going to be without a lot of early entry.
Oh, Barron.
Raleigh Barron is 11.
Yeah, so we're going to be double digits. Yep. Yeah. And we're not even thinking,
they may not dominate the draft,
right?
They're going to have a lot of guys.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, double digits.
But the question was about Ewers and whether or not he's the linchpin behind 12-0 or something slightly smaller.
Right. Man, I think that, look, I've said it and I've said it a million times. I think that the SEC, you know, I've never gone through a Texas season in the SEC just like everybody else has as far as analyzing them. But just as somebody that's been a longtime fan of college football and stuff, I've always viewed an SEC season as being a real gauntlet where any given week, man, you can really step into a snake pit, and next thing you know, something happens where they throw something at you that you didn't see on tape. And when that happens in the same way that, let's say this year, like it did for Texas versus Houston or something like that, right? You get a team with an SEC sort of pedigree of athlete that throws something at you like that gives you that kind of trouble. I don't think they have the athletes that are going to let you sort of get back into it, right? So it feels to me like even if Texas goes out, I think Michigan, with everybody that they're losing, with all the shakeups they've had, all the rest of it, that game now doesn't look – I never thought it was going to be an insurmountable task to face Michigan, right? I thought that Texas actually matched up well against Michigan with the way that they play. But to me, that feels almost now like a game where the expectation for Texas fans should be like, dude, we have an awesome team. They have an awesome team. We should go in there and beat them, right? I think that the Georgia game definitely looms large. And then you just worry about, you worry about the idea of Texas possibly going into some weird SEC game where they stub their toe, or they're just kind of a down week that week, where later on you hear Sark say, well, I just knew at the end of the week the practices weren't as good, and I could tell, you know what I'm saying? And like, we didn't ever think Mississippi State was going to do this. Like, those are the kinds of things that you can see happening, right? But I think it's whenever we're talking about 12-0, could they do it? Absolutely. I think that I'm more along the lines of, I think the reasonable expectation, as we've discussed before, is for them to make the college football playoff. And to make the college football playoff, I think you can do that if you slip up and stub your toe once and have a quality loss to a Oklahoma, Georgia, something like that. As long as those things don't stack up through the course of the season, you don't go into any bad streaks and stuff.
Yeah, for me, Catch, the interesting part about it is when we talk about Quinn, at the end of the day, they still only lost one regular season game. So, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Like, we didn't look at him. Even if you looked at, the OU, I think we look at the OU game. I know Quinn has those 2 interceptions. We still look at that game probably more of a Dylan Gabriel and Texas not being able to stop him for whatever reasons, more so than, damn, what the hell is, this was just all on Quinn, just an abysmal kind of performance that, even in, the Wyoming game per se, right, where it wasn't the best of games, and Texas still won, right? So it's like there is that thing. Now, to your point, I mean, Penix plays out of his mind in Washington, and we still haven't seen that. So, I mean, yes, he didn't raise his level to a guy that hit the turbo button and just did something that we still to this day haven't seen again. So it's interesting because he's good. He's definitely good enough to be 11-1, 12-1, right? He's definitely good enough for that. So I think the margins that we're talking about as far as improvement are pretty slim.
How many games last year what games last year did you think Quinn was great in? Big 12 championship game is obvious.
I'd have to, maybe I can refresh my memory by looking at his game log.
I mean, I can put it back up for you, Alex.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Damn it.
I mean, do you think what about, Alabama? I mean, Bama.
I thought Bama was good.
Bama was very good, and this may be unfair, but I give Xavier and Adonai more credit on those long passes than I do Quinn, those moon balls. Weirdly, we never saw that again the rest of the season. They didn't even attempt to throw those other than in the Alabama game where he just kind of throws it up into the air and those guys ran underneath them and made pretty outstanding catches. I thought the catches were pretty difficult to make. They made them. Mitchell's makes his look real easy. But even if we say Alabama, it was great against Alabama and great against Oklahoma State. There's still a lot of room for improvement. I mean, were they good enough to go 11-1 last year with Quinn? Yeah, and I think that speaks to like how talented and deep this team was. I mean, they just sent double-digit guys to a combine in which that double-digit group of players pretty much owned. They were the talking point of the combine. Outside of that, though, Quinn just wasn't one of the best. He wasn't one of the best players on the team, I don't think. He wasn't a top 5 player on this year's team. This year, the expectation will be that he's either number 1 or number 2, along with Kelvin Banks. And again, I don't have any doubts that he can get there. It's almost my expectation that he's in a position where year by year he's been getting better. It's what you want. It's not like he's stumbling in his progression. He was uneven in his first year at Texas, was kind of the opposite of uneven this year. He was consistently very good, but rarely great. I think this year it's not crazy to say that he takes that step. It's kind of the thing that all great quarterbacks do. They typically make progress. Every great quarterback that Texas has ever had, guys that have had their numbers retired, it was a buildup to get there. It didn't just happen. They didn't just flip a switch and they were great automatically. So I don't think it's insulting to Quinn to say that he hasn't yet reached that status. but that it's very possible that he still does so.
I asked TJ Tampa, the really good defensive back from Iowa State, about what goes into a game of preparation for facing Quinn Ewers, and Sark, and Quinn Ewers and a Sark offense, right? And what he said, and maybe this could tell a little bit of a story about how teams defended Texas, because we know that Houston, and I asked, I forget the name, what's his name, Caesar Nelson, right? The guy
From Houston.
Yep, I was asking him about it. He was talking about how we switched up our whole defense to play Texas. We all saw them go to that stacked defense, right? TJ Tampa said something very similar. He said for Texas, when we faced them, that was a weird week of practice because we changed up the defense to face Texas because we knew that we didn't want to give them anything over the top, and we weren't going to give them anything over the top. We're just going to let them, we're going to let them try to kill us by 1,000 shots because we know, or kill us by 1,000 paper cuts, because we know that what they want to do, what Quinn wants to do and what Sark wants to do is they want to get over the top on you. They want to take these big shots on you, and we weren't going to let them kill us like that. So I think that there were teams that probably did some things to make sure that the offense wasn't as effective in its most optimal way that Sark and Quinn would envision it. And maybe that could have something to do with the fact that he wasn't as productive as you would have maybe liked, given the weapons around him. With that being said, you would think that the quarterback, if it's the best of the best, and if it's a true alpha among the group, would be able to overcome those things, right? He would be able to figure out a way to insert his will and not have to bend his will to what the other team's trying to make him do.
Onward, I don't think there's any doubt. Do the Longhorns have enough to finish 12-0? Absolutely, yes. No doubt in my mind. Like, every piece of the puzzle is there. The coaching's there. The quarterback play is there. The talent at every position is there. Will they is a separate question, but do they have enough? Absolutely. We're now talking about one of the top 3 or 4 most talented teams in college football. And if you look at the Super Blue Chip rankings as they stand right now, there are 4 teams that are separate from everybody. Georgia, Ohio State, those 2 from a pure talent standpoint, kind of on their own tier right now. Texas closing the gap, and then Alabama right there as well. Now, Alabama's going through a massive transition, so it's hard to know what we're talking about with them exactly, although I think they have a great coach. I think DeBoer is phenomenal. I think he's going to end up being one of the new frontline coaches.
Probably so, man.
In the next decade and a half.
It pains me to say, but it's probably true. It's probably true.
I think if you're talking Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, those are the 3 teams in 2024 that I will absolutely say yes to. Do they have enough to go 12-0? I don't know that there's a whole lot beyond that I feel confident in saying yes about. Those 3, yes. I don't really feel that way about anybody else.
Yeah, Catch. And I mean, in the schedule could favor Texas in that conversation as well, right? Because at the end of the day, I'll put that up here too. At the end of the day, we'll see what it looks like, what this Michigan team looks like. But, they'll be breaking in a new quarterback. Even if it's at home, they'll still be breaking in a new guy, this upcoming year. We look at that first 5 games, Catch, before the bye week. I mean, 5-0 should be on the table, right? I don't think. I mean,
it'll be disappointing if they're not.
Yes, right. I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, Michigan would be the only one, and you'd have to say what the hell happened there. But Texas, you can't brag about being able to go on the road to beat an Alabama team that was loaded, and then and not be able to beat a Michigan team that's kind of going through some sort of reshuffling of the deck, right? Oklahoma is always going to be tough, so that's always going to be a tough game. Georgia obviously is a tough game, and then when you get past Georgia, Catch, the rest of that schedule, those are just Jags. Those are just teams, right? I mean, those teams, Catch, from when I looked on it, it was betonline.ag. These teams had the worst odds of winning the SEC championship. Those teams right there.
When we talked about the prop over and under bets a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember. it might have been FanDuel that came out with it. I can't remember exactly who had those initial over and unders for the schools on the Texas schedule. 5 of the 6 worst teams in the SEC are on the Texas schedule this year in terms of projected win totals.
Yeah.
That game there's only 3 teams on the entire schedule that are projected, if you look at the over and under numbers, that are above 9. And that's Michigan, which I don't even know who their quarterback is. I don't know how you could pick them to be so high. Their schedule's really tough. I know that they just won the national championship, but their quarterback this year may be a guy that didn't even throw a pass a year ago. Total run threat. And then you've got Georgia, and then you've got Texas A&M, who's sitting at 9.5. So, it's not on paper. It's not the most dangerous schedule. I think you pointed it out, Onward. You look at that second half of the schedule. The thing I would say, the last month of the season at Arkansas and at A&M, 2 tricky games. In the same way that we knew anytime.
I'm not doing that again.
No, it's not even necessarily about the Arkansas game from a few years ago, but we even when we looked at Texas's schedule last year, we'd go, well, one of those games against the Houstons or the Baylors or whomever will turn out to be a bit of a tricky game. And it turned out to be the Houston game where, if not for a bad spot for Houston inside the Texas 10-yard line, who knows how that game goes? You think about the Kansas State game at home, where I'll be honest, I thought Kansas State in the final minute of that game was going to win it. And it's a real testament to Tavondre Sweat and the rest of that Texas defense that they basically said, not on our watch from the 7-yard line.
It's a testament to Will Howard not seeing Ben Sinnott running wide open. So I couldn't believe it. It's like, oh my God, Sinnott's right there. Oh no, the game's over. And he didn't turn his head to the right.
There are games that we're assuming Texas will win, that a couple of them will prove to be tricky because that's college football. But, I think the best news that Texas has going for them, 2 things, and this will be my final comment and we can wrap up the video. I think the talent is there. That while they've lost a lot of talent, they're replacing it with guys waiting in the wings that were more talented coming in than a lot of the guys that just departed. Jonte Cook's a perfect example, right? Like, he's replacing Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, but that guy is a prospect rated higher than both of those guys. Although who knows, maybe if Xavier Worthy had a senior year, his ranking would have looked a little bit different. The other thing I'll say is, if Quinn takes the step, that is the tide that lifts all boats. If we're talking about a Quinn Ewers that's playing at a 175 or higher level across the season next year, Texas will have every chance to do exactly what we're asking in this video.
Alex?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that we've come full circle. That's exactly right. I think we have consensus. That's the deal. It all falls on Quinn, man. This is Quinn's year. This is Quinn's year. And it's a lot of pressure because, like I said, to start this thing out, the narrative is already being built up, and hopefully he can use that narrative as something of motivation, right? You would think that the motivation coming into this thing is like, man, now we know what to taste the college football playoff. Now we know what it's like. We got to get back. We got to, like Sark said, we got to be maniacal. I'm borderline obsessed with getting back, right? Well, now with Quinn, you got not only that, you have the mounting narrative that it's like, this is his year. This is his year where he's got to show it, and everything's right there in front of him. They just need to go get it.
Catch it. I don't want to start something that would continue us going for another hour, but I will drop this bomb that I've dropped before, but I will drop this bomb on the way out. Making sure Arch is ready to go if need be might be one of the more important things and keys to this component. If we're talking about 12-0, because we're talking about Quinn Ewers playing in 12 games in a regular season. I haven't seen Quinn Ewers play 12 games in a regular season in college. It's not, no fault of his own. You can't control injuries. Like, those things happen. But we've gone through the list before, Catch, of this quarterback position at Texas. When you go back to from David Ash on, just about every single quarterback has been injured just about every single year. Like, just about every single year. And most of those guys have had to miss a game or multiple games. And so, as relates to this conversation, while you don't wish it and while you knock on wood that it doesn't happen, but understanding the volatility of it, better make sure Arch is ready. That if there's any reason that history can repeats itself, that guy better be ready to go, and that guy better be ready to hit the ground running. And I know that's the worst bomb to drop when we're thinking about final thoughts, but I know we can talk another hour about that. But having Arch is just about as key to having Quinn.
Well, it was a year ago with Malik Murphy. I mean, they needed Malik to be ready for the moment, because Quinn did miss a couple of games, and they don't play in the champion. They don't make it to the playoffs if in that couple of game stretch Malik Murphy isn't capable enough to help get them there. All right, guys, do us a solid. I was looking at it just a little bit ago. We only had like 43 thumbs ups. Come on.
No, come on.
Hit that thumbs up. It's cockamamie. If you guys haven't hit the thumbs up button.
It's insulting. There's 186 of you in the chat.
Hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to ask you that until we're blue in the face. Get notifications, because you never know when breaking news like Xavier Worthy running 4.21 over the weekend. You never know when a breaking news video is going to occur. So do all of those things for myself, for Anwar Richardson, for Alex Dunlap, and definitely our fine friends over at rogueshop.com. Go to the website, just go shopping. It's not just about the cartridges or the gummies or the salves or the pet stuff. It's about all of it. They've got so much product that can make your life just a little bit better in so many ways. Why not check it out? Until next Monday, there it is. Scan that QR code and go shopping. I need some new carts. I'll probably be doing that later on today. So Richard, Shar, be ready for my email. Until next Monday or noon today, you guys hang with us over at Orange Bloods Live. We love you. Take care. Later.